Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic, it's Richard Spray. Well, there we go. How you doing, Richard? Good morning to you, sir.
I'm good. That was not what I was expecting whatsoever, but I love how you just keep surfacing them. It's amazing. The research you're doing to make this more dynamic. It's phenomenal. Thanks, man.
Well,
I'm good. How are you?
I'll come on to that. I'm good. I'll come on to more of that in a minute. Nottingham Forest travelled to the capital this weekend. Yes, indeed. They are going to be playing in London. Oh yeah, they're going to be playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and so what I want to say is how are we going to stop this free scoring Cole Palmer. It's going to be a tough one for the Reds as they look to bounce back from defeat last time out and get back to earning points on the road at a ground that has so far, since being back in the Premier League, yielded 4 points from 2 games. So, to preview this final match before the international break, Richard and I have a guest, and we're delighted to say... Yes, it's Raf, the Random Pundit. Hey, Raf, how are you, mate?
Oh, I'm really well, thanks. Thanks so much for having me on again. Absolutely love it.
You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. If you are watching along and listening, etc., please do like and subscribe to the channel. It's really useful for us in terms of numbers, so please do hit the relevant buttons. Today's intro music then, Richard, was of course the brilliant For America by Red Box. If you're new to the channel, then let me explain. I always introduce Richard with a different piece of music every episode. The theme, of course, is anything American-ish. And for the very first time, one of you actually reached out and dropped me a DM to suggest that piece of music for today. So thank you very much to Gary Lamb for doing so. If you have any suggestions, folks, then please do send me a private DM on X, because we like to keep these things secret from Richard, you see, and all the rest of you. So yes, it's my little plaything. So do send me a private DM on X. My handle is there on the screen for you to see, at Greg_Oram. If you're not following me already, I am currently on 997 followers. I'm 3 away from the big 1,000 that Raf breached a few weeks ago. It would be quite something for me to breach that as well. So please do follow me if you can. And of course, Richard and Raf as well. All the boys on the pod, please do follow us, and we'll try and follow you back, of course. Talking Reds has its own Twitter page as well, so you can find us at Talking Reds. The last time I posed a Forest quiz question, but I forgot to reveal the answer. Stupid me. The quiz question last time was, which Doctor Who actor played for Nottingham Forest in the academy? And so the answer, of course, was Matt Smith. Matt Smith. He played in the academy alongside the likes of Jermaine Genus. So that was your quiz question of last time. I've got one for today, and I will give the answer at the end of this episode. Today's quiz question: who is Forest's oldest ever league player? So who has represented Forest in the league and was the oldest player to do so? You can pop your answers in the comments. You can play along at home. I'll give the answer at the end. Just before we get into our Chelsea preview, I also want to say that it's 34 years today since the passing of Peter Taylor. Peter, a local lad who grew up in the Meadows, was of course integral to the most successful period in the club's history as Brian Clough's right-hand man. And Brian Clough famously said, "I'm not equipped to manage successfully without Peter Taylor. I am the shop window and he is the goods in the back." Well, Peter, your place in our hearts and minds will live forever. It will never, ever diminish. And we send our love and best wishes to the Taylor family on this day of remembering our former Nottingham Forest assistant manager. Okay, right. On we go. This weekend, big game. Chelsea at the Bridge. Kick us off, Raf. Give us your thoughts on this one. Just for anyone else that hasn't noticed previously or heard previously, you live really close to the Chelsea ground. And, you know, as well as being a diehard Forest fan, you do get the opportunity to go and watch Chelsea and have done for years. And so obviously you want to see football. And so you go and see Premier League football at the Bridge quite a lot. So there's probably no one that we work with who's more qualified to give us the lowdown on Chelsea. So go for it.
That's very kind. Yeah, I'm walking distance from Stamford Bridge, also Craven Cottage as well. So I'm lucky enough to get exposure to those two teams and really kind of have a bit of understanding of how they work. And Chelsea's a very interesting one. In our predictions at the beginning of the season, where we all were saying where teams were going to finish, I put my hand up to some derision within the team to say that Chelsea were going to finish fourth. And we're beginning to see what I was talking about, I think, unless it all falls off a cliff. But the depth and the quality they have, it's just about knitting the pieces together. And I think that has happened quicker than many people would have given Chelsea credit for. So initially, scary proposition actually going to play them at the moment. Goals everywhere when they're playing at the moment. They scored 4 last night, and that was their full second 11. Not a single one of their first 11 played, so they're fully rested.
That was last night against Ghent in the Europa League, right?
Absolutely, 4-2, and the 2 in that scoreline is the super interesting thing, which really gives us hope. Okay, so to that end, what I think we can all agree on is that their front four is actually quite frightening. Cole Palmer and co. But even Jackson, who looked fully useless all of last season, even though goals were still going in, the amount he was missing, just the number of chances he was being fed, even he is looking like a useful number 9 now as well and scoring for fun. Sancho's come in and is looking at home, which is quite scary. And for me, probably the best player alongside Cole Palmer is Madueke, and he certainly was at the tail end of last season. I was hoping Forest were going to be able to get him cheekily as one of our wingers in the closed season. So far off the mark because he's actually seen now as a starter, and
he's in the England squad as well now.
Oh, exactly. Like that front four is bonkers. And if you have a look at then anyone coming off the bench, you've got Nkuku, who I actually believe is a better striker than Jackson. You've got Mudryk, who, other than his end product, but is lightning quick and frightening on the left. You've got Pedro Neto, who's insanely talented, and I don't know how he's not in a starting lineup on the right, and João Felix through the middle. So it's not like we can play a waiting game like we might have seen with Liverpool, try and wear them down, get their front line all tired, and then put on ours and go grab a goal, because they can replace their entire front four and be full of beans and still go and score more and more goals. So we can't be passive. And that is really that's my first takeaway, is that there's no point trying to be super passive against Chelsea because they're just going to score anyway. So we need to get on the front foot and score and hope our backline does it. Before I go in more depth, back to you, Greg and Richard, on before I give some rationales of how we go about doing it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we definitely want to get your take on that, 100%. It's interesting you name drop their players. And I was at the Bridge last year when we beat them 1-0, and that was literally the first game after the window closed. So it was a few games prior to where we are now. So, but at the same kind of time in the season, it was actually Cole Palmer's debut as well. So, you know, he hadn't at all hit any ground running at that point. Of course, we got to win the Elanga goal, and one player on the pitch for Chelsea that day was Mudryk, who you mentioned, and he's a player that I think has really failed to set the world afire since he arrived at Chelsea, and all the Forest fans were just. that is actually the sound clip from that game as well. He came up with what a waste of money. Oh yeah, I've got them all. But no, having said that, you talked about Nicholas Jackson, and I think that Cole Palmer is the key to getting the best out of him this season. I think the link up and the understanding between Palmer and Jackson is a worry. So, Richard, you know, thinking about Chelsea, thinking about their players is one thing, but we've got to think about our players and our squads. How are you feeling about Forest going into this one?
You know, I agree with Raph. I think the way that we approach this game is the opposite of the way we approached Liverpool in some ways. We don't sit back. We don't play tentative. We come at them as much as humanly possible. You know, we'll get onto the lineup sort of selection there, but the way the reason I have some optimism, I'm sure Raph, this is where you're going to go at some point in this episode, is you're going to talk about the way our back line functions, and I think the way that we're playing defensively. As much as I'd love to see free-flowing football and I love to see attacking football, and we all love the excitement of that. The reality is, against a team like this, with that kind of elite talent, as Raph referenced in that front four, especially Cole Palmer, which, as good as Erling Haaland is, right, he's the best striker in the world, really. I don't know if there's a better player on the planet right now than Cole Palmer. He's just frightening, I mean, in terms of what his skill set. So that being the case, I feel a lot better right now, strictly because of what we have in Milenkovic and the kind of stoutness that he provides, that back line, the kind of leadership that he provides, the experience at still a relatively young age. He's only 26 years old, coupled with what Murillo's done. Murillo, to me, even though in the preseason he seemed a little off, right? He didn't seem quite as locked in. Since the season has started, that completely flipped. And he is locked in. And he is playing the best football I think we've ever seen him play. And the scary part is he can get so much better too. So the way that we play, I think defensively, the way that we can hopefully restrict some of the movement in and around the box, I think will help us. And we've shown that propensity to do that against better teams. And so hopefully that continues to be the case. That's the only thing that really honestly primarily gives me hope. If you look at some of how Brighton played, if you watch the way that match unfolded, they got at them a little bit on the opposite side. And so I don't think they're impenetrable on their defensive back four either. So I think there's opportunities, as we always seem to take, which is to look at that counter, look at the way that we can, and now with hopefully Morgan back, orchestrating everything and kind of, getting things moving on the attack, and kind of settling things in with his creativity as well, creating opportunities that we just didn't seem to get in the last match primarily. There's a lot to like and a lot to be hopeful for, but at the same time, I'm still cautiously optimistic and still looking in my mind, hoping for a draw at minimum. That I think would be a massive victory for us, even if it's not the 3 points, but at least gain the 1 point. But I think defensively, we set up in a way that we can hopefully kind of counteract what they're good at. So what we're good at is the opposite of what they're good at. It's that it plays well, and it plays well for us, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned taking a draw. I've got to be honest with you. I'd take a draw now. I really would. Our form on the road has obviously been good. 2 wins against Southampton, Liverpool, a draw away at Brighton. Good points on the road are really what's going to support us through the season. We want to get back to making the world famous City Ground a fortress, and we'll worry about that for the visit of Crystal Palace after the international break. But for this one, I'll take a point now. Absolutely. It's all about how I think we do deal with Cole Palmer, Raf, how we deal with that front four, and how ultimately we set up. I think I'm right in suggesting that the Chelsea fullbacks aren't overlapping as much as they were previously under different management. So, does this set us up for wing play? And also last week, the high press does, see their goalkeeper trying to pass out and find his defensive or midfield companions. The Brighton front line were able to steal the ball a couple of times. So I kind of feel like the high press might be a way forward as well.
Benny Hill tune for that.
It wasn't. It was comedy.
Some of their defending.
So look, let's Raf, take us through. I mean, I know you've been kind of thinking about strategy. You've been thinking about a setup play. You've been thinking about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. So the floor is yours. and whilst you're talking as well, if we go into formation, I'll share my screen as well. I'll put that on the stage as we speak. So just before you get going, what I've done is I've just set us up off the back of my
a few things about the back line.
Yeah.
Right?
So look, I've just 1 second. I've just set us just before you do. I've just set us up with a 4-3-2-1. Now that's me setting that up. That's no one suggesting that's what we're going to do. With the Dominguez, Yates, and Ward-Prowse in the 3, and Anderson and Gibbs-White playing in behind Wood for those that are listening. So over to you, Raf. Would you think a 4-3-2-1 might be the way to go? How would you set up, and what are you thinking?
So I think that having 3 in the midfield is a possibility. As long as Anderson isn't dropping back into making a 4, then I think that works. There's no real place for 4 in midfield in this game. The rationale for that is they will have Fofana and Colwell as their 2 centre-backs. They'll have Cucurella on the left and they'll have Malagusto on the right. By the way, Malagusto, oh my gosh, what a player at his age. Ridiculous. But they actually did this under Poch as well, so it's not a new concept. Cucurella will come in and be an inverted fullback and go into the midfield when they have the ball. So they turn into a 3 in midfield with Enzo Fernandez and Caicedo, with Cucurella joining them as 3. They're maximum 3 in midfield. Now, 2 of those 3 are exceptional talents, but putting 4 into there seems like a massive overload. Now, if Cucurella's gone up and Gusto is supposed to be disciplined and stay back in that back 3, he's not a central defender by any stretch. He's very, very slight. So that in itself is a weakness in a back 3. But if he does what he's really good at and is a marauding runner, if you think about like Nico Williams and how good he is going forward, that's Malan Gusto going forward. But if he's forward, they've only got 2 in defence at that juncture. And so even if there are 3 or a 2, there's a huge amount of space on either side by the corner flags. So actually, I think we need a wider team than this to be able to launch up. And we're not going to be able to really rely on too much from Moreno and Aina, I don't think, because of the threat of their 4. They are unfortunately going to be on defensive duties most of the time in this game, and they need to have good games. But we need, this is where our wingers come into play and cause absolute havoc behind their back line. That's
4-2-3-1? 4-2-3-1?
I think we play what we normally play. But it could be 4-3-3 and it could be 4-2-3-1. But we need to have at least one wing outlet. And I think we need to be very sensible. If we have one, we play, if Gusto ends up being the one moving into midfield and not Cucurella, we need to be on it and put the winger on the side of the inverted fullback so that we can pin them back in there, and then we start winning the midfield a bit more because that inverted fullback can't come out as much as that as well. But very quickly, just to really highlight the problem that Chelsea have in defence. Fofana, 23 years old. Colwell, 21 years old. Gusto, 21 years old. That back line is very, very young. Fofana was out for basically 2 years with a broken leg and then something else. He hadn't played for about 2 years since he's joined. Colwell's been playing at left back, filling in a role most of last year on and off. And Fofana and Colwell have got mistakes in them. Like per game, they will each have a mistake for sure. So they're not even resolute at the back and they're very young. Sanchez, like you've alluded to, Greg, he's got a bit of Turner in him with the ball at his feet when under some pressure. So you just have a look at it. Why not have at it? Go at it. Put them under pressure. High turnover. There are goals in there for us. And we just need to look at the back line and go, guys, do what you do. Just be really, really, really tight. And play a low line. That's absolutely fine. Don't let them get behind us. Brighton got ruined with a high line. Spurs got ruined with a high line last season. If you look at all of the times when Chelsea do really, really well, it's because they get behind and catch teams on the break or get behind them and score goals.
So look at that team I've got on the screen. which
Love
for
it.
anyone listening, I've got Yates and Ward-Prowse in the midfield too now. I've got Anderson on the left, Gibbs-White in the 10 and Alanga on the right with Wood up top. So is that kind of personnel okay for you, or would you rather see
I
Hudson-Odoi?
like that. And also, if there is any chance in the world for Cole Palmer to have an off day, it is because Yates is on the pitch being the ultimate wind-up merchant and gets in Cole Palmer's head. Now, well, we saw it at Liverpool with McAllister, worked an absolute treat. I do think that Cole Palmer has more mental strength than McAllister to be able to not let Yates get in his head. But if anyone can do it, Yatesy can do it. And that is potentially why I think this setup, as much as we might get lambasted for Callum Hudson-Odoi not being on the pitch, because to be fair, he probably is our largest goal threat, I would say. This is actually quite a good setup, specifically as a hybrid to play to our strengths, but be mindful of the way that Chelsea are set up.
Richard, are there any personnel changes that you would make to that? Would you rather see Hudson-Odoi start? What are you thinking personnel-wise and shape-wise? Are you happy with the shape first and foremost?
Yeah.
Where are you at?
Yeah, I think the shape's the right thing because I think we even said that from the last match. I mean, clearly a 4-4-2 was not really the most common thing we see anymore. So that right off the bat, you guys articulated that in the last episode. But I almost would say, I know this is it feels counterintuitive based off the fact that Ward-Prowse is so experienced and because of the very unique skill set that he provides and how tight he is on the ball and how he can help provide some stability in the back. He's got a little bit more skill on the ball than say, a Yatesy who's obviously more defensive oriented. But I kind of like the idea of moving Yates where Ward-Prowse is, moving Anderson where Yates is, and then bringing Callum Hudson-Odoi. Because if there's ever a match where we're going to see the best of Callum Hudson-Odoi, it's against his former club. I think the way that he operates, and as you stated with Gusto, is that the kind of player, because of his youth, that Callum, who's not ancient by any means, I mean, he's still a really young guy, can take advantage of it because he's got a little bit of savvy. He's got a little bit more mental acumen in terms of how he manages space and how he can work around him. And we saw him do that to Bradley, right, against Liverpool, which clearly bore fruit because of him scoring that goal. And so I almost wonder if we need to sort of stick with what we've seen be successful and outside of the formation, the personnel that we used against Liverpool. But these kinds of guys seem to play very cohesive together. So, but I love the point that Raf made. I mean, absolutely, if there's ever a match to see Yates involved, this is the perfect one, right? We always say that away match where he's got to frustrate that midfield group and he's got to take one of their best players out of the match. That's the guy to do it because he will get in the head because of his experience. Even though Cole Palmer is playing at elite level, the reality is how often does he go up against a guy like Ryan Yates, whose sole purpose is there to be that enforcer and that, play those mind games and play the psychological warfare, as I've mentioned previously. So it'll be an interesting sort of dynamic to see how that all plays out. But I kind of like this setup just simply because of the balance that we provide. I mean, there may be a case for bringing Nico back in because, as you said, Raf, he could provide. I mean, both Aina and Moreno can do this as well. But it might be an interesting thing to bring on Nico because he has a little bit more pace, I think, than a Moreno. Switch Aina back to the left and bring Nico back in. But there's opportunities, as we've said, week after week when it comes with how Nuno's going to structure things and how he's going to establish his personnel. There's opportunities. I mean, you could make the argument, and I think we'll see this in another version of this with Jota up front as well, just to create some havoc on the wing. Because while Alanga's got more pace and he's certainly got, I think, a higher ceiling, his consistency is always in question, right, in terms of what he brings week in and week out. So, yeah.
Okay. So, is it a possibility? And before I actually get into that, I want to quickly just put out a shout to a few people joining us. Bruce, how you doing, mate? Good to see you. Paul Morley's joining us as well in the chat. Paul talking about Sanchez getting the jitters as well. Gerald, I beg your pardon, is saying that Colwell hasn't made any mistakes this season. He's been a top 3 player. He has been very good. Yeah, well, listen, he's in the England squad again, And Gerald also goes on to say that Aina could be a problem for Cucurella. Strength-wise, he could power him off the ball and cause chaos down the right. That's very true. Good morning to Stu Freestone, the cheese trader. How you doing, Stu? Good to have you with us. John is asking, can Anderson man mark Palmer? Or maybe that would be a game for Yates to do that. One of them, possibly. That might leave a lot of space for their other good players to get involved. Good morning to Wolfie as well. Great to have you with us. And Patch Adams is talking about Williams being slower than Moreno. I think Williams, I thought, had pretty good pace personally. But, you know, we've got those options. What I was going to ask was, is there any scope on this game for us to go to 3 at the back? So we'd be looking at, I'm just making some changes on the screen here. So we'd be looking at Gibbs White possibly up top alongside Woods, and then our wide play to come in the form of Aina and Moreno, and then the third centre back to come in. We could suggest that maybe Morato would be the best come in, and then in that midfield you might, for example, have James Ward-Prowse, if I can find him. There he is. So a 3 of Ward-Prowse, Anderson and Yates. The wide play then is coming from your wing backs with Moreno and Aina, a back 3 of Murillo, Milenkovic, Morato, and Wood and Gibbs White. Could we possibly see that? I mean, we are going to play a low block, I hope, because that high line you talked about, Raf, is going to kill us. And so thinking about the tactics against Liverpool, I know we didn't go 3 at the back against Liverpool, but I kind of feel that Nuno's got that up his sleeve, and you know his away day tactics and formations have been quite strong so far. So could it be, Raf, that we might see a 3 at the back, or do you think that would not be the way to go?
So historically, 3 at the back and playing a kind of back 5, back 3, however you want to call it, but using wing backs as our kind of 2 extra in midfield, that has worked well for us against the big 6 historically, and it has worked well. The reason why I'm fearful, and I don't think it will work here, is if we look at this, the attacking threat comes where we need to be attacking, which is down the sides, in the holes down the side. Will have to come from Moreno and Aina. If the ball gets turned over, they can move it forward very quickly. And we then are stuck with a back 3 against their 4, and either Palmer is being Palmer's got a free roll effectively, because Murillo's going to get dragged off to one side. Morato is going to get dragged off to the other. You then got Jackson entertaining Milenkovic, and then Palmer just has got effectively a free roll on the break. Or they keep narrow, keep Jackson and Palmer occupied, and then the 2 wingers have at it down our sides. And if we were, the fact of the matter is, we'll probably have 35% of the ball. And so it's a case of really trying to find the balance. And I really think this is a game where we need our fullbacks firmly in position, not that mobile, and they need to be the 2 best defending fullbacks that we had.
Steve-O in the comments says Palace did great against Chelsea with a back 3. They sat deep. West Ham did try the same, but pressed, and they effectively went back to a high line and got picked apart. So, you know, there is success to be had potentially with that kind of formation. It could work. I mean, it could work. And another question might be that we've talked about Gibbs White operating a deeper role, and so is that out of the question that the Wood a Wonyi partnership goes again? I mean, good friend and contributor to Talking Reds, Danscape. You know, he's talked to us and been on Twitter and quite vocal about the fact that for those 45 minutes, a Wonyi's output and contribution was greater than Chris Wood's. And whilst he got taken off at half time, it may well have been that he picked up a knock, but in that kind of formation with the wide play, I mean, is this a game for, whether it's in that kind of formation, Richard, or whether it's in any other kind of formation, could this be a game for Taiwo Awoniyi?
I think you could make the case in the first half, if you had inserted Morgan Gibbs White into that play, would there have been more opportunities? And I would tend to agree based off of his opportunities for creation, and how successful he is in that, statistically in that. As Raf, often says, he may not take as many shots, and he's certainly not as accurate with his shooting, but his ability to sort of build up, help the build up play, and feed those front players, those forwards and wingers. In this case, you wouldn't have the wingers, but I think there's a case for that because you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now that you have someone who has the propensity to do that, great, because then he can help in the attacking portion of that, and in himself, he can weave in and out of space, and he can create problems just with how creative he is on the ball. So I think there's more potential for success with that kind of setup, because I don't think we saw them play with anything that was even remotely close to a true number 10, if you want to call him that. Even though in this case, I think you're fashioning Gibbs White as more of an 8. It looks like he's kind of sitting deeper and being more of a box-to-box player, which I think he's capable of doing. And I think we've all said that might at some points be a better option for him, just because of the fact that he doesn't score as many goals. But invariably, I think this is an option, and I don't see that this being impossible, because maybe there's elements of what Nuno did last week that he said, all right, that actually worked decently well, but it was missing something with a little bit more creativity, and that's Morgan Gibbs White. So it's possible that could be very functional, and that could be a little bit more dangerous than what we saw last week.
Yeah, I do think that. With
I think he's more likely to. Sorry, go ahead, Raf. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I do love Taiwo, and I think Danscape. Yeah, he's right. Taiwo had some, especially with the ball at his feet in tight situations. He won the ball back. He actually created quite a lot. He was very close to scoring, and actually had a better output than Wood. But there's one really telling part of that game. We were on a break. Taiwo had the ball, and the goal and the defender was faced up our way, right? So he hadn't even turned to start running.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
We were on a break.
Go ahead.
He couldn't outrun the defender. That part of his game is not there at the moment. And how we are going to score against Chelsea is in the transition, on the break, being quick, and then we need, before they can get back into their formation with their 4 at the back, basically. So this is not a game for Taiwo. Now, if he starts and he scores, and I have egg on my face, I'll be the happiest person in the entire world, because I love Big T. I think he has so much value still to offer us when we can get him back up and actually running quickly and have gas in the tank. But this isn't a game for him.
I guess my only thought in relation to that, and I think you're right, but invariably, I think what he brings, even if he doesn't have the pace, is he has the physicality to create challenges, and he gets in the mind of those center backs, because they realize his strength in and of itself is just a massive advantage more often than not against someone like, Colwell, I think is a pretty decently sized, human being. So it's not like he can't manage it, but I think the way that he operates, the presence that he brings in that sense, to me, is a massive advantage over Wood. Facing goal, Wood can be frightening, but the way Taiwo can kind of, the way he plays with his back to goal, and to your point, Raf, and you've said this a million times, I think, during the course of our chats, one thing that really frustrates us about Wood at times is that he tends to get offsides frequently, unnecessarily. And so those are the moments you can't give away, right? You've got to take as much advantage, because to your point, we're not going to maintain a higher level of possession. So we've got to take every advantage we possibly can. And to have someone like that who can, I think for lack of a better word, boxes players out. He can hold the ball, and he can hand it off to a Gibbs White or to a Hudson-Odoi. The way he does that, to me, he has a much higher, he's a lot more talented in that sense. So, and more capable in that sense. So, I get what you're saying. I think you're right, but because you can't argue with the output from what Wood's given us.
Okay. So I've been playing around on the screen for those listening. I've gone to a flat back for Moreno, Aina, Murillo, Milenkovic, which I think we all agree is probably our first choice back four, with a 4-2-3-1, with Anderson and Yates in the 2, and then back to what we would have always said was our traditional strongest front four, with Gibbs White in the 10, Hudson-Odoi on the left, Alanga on the right, and Taiwo Awoniyi up top. I mean, on paper and traditionally, you might suggest that that's our strongest team, give or take a player or two. Or, we've got really good strength and depth. So, I think we're going to have success in this game with that high press. So is Awoniyi the right man at the moment for that high press? Some might say, well, no, he hasn't got the engine, he hasn't got the legs. So maybe, the Hudson-Odois and the Langas and the Gibbs-White, that kind of front four with Wood might be the way forward to really kind of press that goalkeeper and those back central defenders for Chelsea. Gerald, another comment is talking about Forest being a strong test for the centre backs of Chelsea, pinning them in, making life difficult through that press, and really getting in and amongst it. One other quick team I wanted to show you before we move on is of course this one. I promised I'd do it again for him. My son Orlando, it gets really into team selection. He has picked the same back four. He's gone for a Yates and Ward-Prowse in midfield with a front four of Hudson-Odoi on the left, Jota Silva on the right, Gibbs-White in the 10, and Chris Wood up top. So Jota Silva's that man that I love, and he's really made an impact off the bench. Could we see him starting perhaps this one, Raf, or is he more likely to have an impact off the bench? And him and Sosa really kind of starting to find their feet a little bit now, aren't they?
Yeah, and I've got a real soft spot starting already for Jota because Ain is my favourite player, but I can see Jota Silva becoming it just from, it's unbelievable. Just everything about him is absolutely brilliant. I think, though, we are seeing that Nuno sees Hudson-Odoi and Elanga as one pairing and Silva and Jota as another pairing, and just their wavelengths. If you have a look at some of the passes that Elanga gets off for Callum, for example, they just have a way of working together. And Jota and Sosa have interlinked really well when they've been on the pitch together as well. So I'd love it if Jota was given a start, and I don't think it's a wrong thing to think and to give it a go. I think it's definitely worth a while. Do I think Nuno will do it? No, I don't.
Raf, just quickly, give us a score prediction. Quickly. Today. Anytime today. I'm filling because you've gone really quiet and everyone's wondering what's going on. So let me finish talking, otherwise people aren't going to hear you. Otherwise, we're talking at the same time. So what is your final score prediction?
It's 2-1 to Chelsea, unfortunately.
You think a 2-1 to Chelsea? Okay.
Yeah.
Richard?
I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw just because I think the way that we're going to set things up, we're going to make life difficult for them in the middle of the pitch. And I'm hoping, maybe cautiously optimistic, that Cole Palmer will not have his worst game of the season because Yates won't allow him to do what he does.
You heard it here first. Cole Palmer is going to have his worst game of the season against Nottingham Forest on Sunday. Ryan Yates is going to be the man to stifle him, S-house him, and that deadpan Cole Palmer expression that reveals no emotion whatsoever, whether he's happy or sad, will not tell the story of such a bad game that he's had. I think it's one we can all laugh at. So you're saying 1-1, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's going to be 1-1 as well. I'm going to say it. I think I can't quite bring myself to predicting a defeat for Forest. I just can't do it. I know. I just don't want to do it. But yeah, I think Raf might be correct with his prediction. I just hope that we are still able to put on a good performance, because performances are really, really important, and confidence going into the international break is really, really important. So, I hope that we can put on a good performance. That is key to taking us into the Crystal Palace game at home after the international break. So, all being well, we will come away from Sunday feeling quite happy about how the game's gone, hopefully with a point in the bag. Who knows? Maybe even all three. Okay, right. So if you are watching along, you're going to see some beautiful cheese selection. If you're listening, just a little bit of music for you to days and listen to whilst you imagine the sweet smelling cheddar and red Leicester and other beautiful cheeses that are available from the cheese trader. Yes, good friend of Talking Reds. Our sponsor is the cheese trader based in York, the Tricky Cheese. Oh, yes. Fellow Forest fan, Stu Freestone. He's the man to contact if you've got any functions coming up. If you want some nice cheese, then you can quote Talking Reds and get your 10% off every time you order. All the details are on the card on the screen at the moment. They are also in the bio for this episode. So please contact the Cheese Trader for all of your cheesy delights. All right, on to club news. In club news, or in football news, we have Mr. Marinakis. Now then, it came out yesterday that there's been a regulation and discipline update. Nottingham Forest's Evangelos Marinakis has been charged with misconduct following their Premier League match against Fulham on Saturday the 28th of September. It's alleged that the behaviour of Evangelos Marinakis around the tunnel area after the final whistle was improper. He has until Monday the 7th of October to respond. Right. So we had, after the Fulham game last weekend, Richard, it kind of got released into the press or so on that the hierarchy at Forest were feeling a little bit disgruntled. That's all we knew. It felt like that, someone had said something, but that's all we knew. It's now come out that there was more to it than that. So the big man who loves getting himself down at pitch side, and he did it against Liverpool, he kind of rode that one out a little bit. But the big man's getting a charge this time. And this goes off the back of Nuno's charge and Gibbs White's charge following the Brighton game, which we're still waiting to get the outcome of. It could well be that Nuno sees a touchline ban. He's got a warning overhanging from last season against Everton. Gibbs White may get a further game ban. My gut feeling is that news might come after this weekend's set of fixtures. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But the big man, Richard, he is now up on a charge as well. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, shades of Liverpool last season, right, where we had some unfortunate refereeing decisions go against us, which, as we know, last season tend to be pretty common. And enough to clearly incite him to come down pitch side, like you mentioned. It's not exactly the same situation, but clearly the way that things were adjudicated on the pitch last week was not something that he was necessarily a fan of. This is the one thing you get with him, right? In the same way that we get immense passion and drive and a desire to see Forest be successful and be one of the top 10 teams in the Premier League, you're also going to get this sort of insertion of himself into the moment that he probably doesn't need to do. But at the same time, I don't know if I would necessarily, maybe I sound foolish saying this, I don't know if I necessarily want him to stop being that kind of guy in such a way, because I kind of like that about him, right? He's just not going to accept injustices. And I know there's been a lot of conversations about how, he's voted, towards VAR and things like that in our own personal chats. And so he may be part of the problem when it comes to something like that. But at the same time, I think it's great to see him defend his team and defend his guys and understand that, the way that these things are being processed and the way that things are happening, it's affecting the team, as we saw last week with not having our talisman on the pitch. And so, I kind of applaud him to a degree. I mean, it wasn't an email out or a post out through Twitter lambasting the PGMOL for their poor performances. It was just him saying basically this is unacceptable. And yeah, how he goes about it, maybe he could say that he could manage it a little bit differently. But I kind of like his passion. I kind of like his fire, because I think that's reflected in terms of what we're trying to accomplish as a team. We're trying to not let these elite clubs dictate how things operate, and so we want to show that we're not going to sit back and accept it. So
Yeah. Listen, for me, Evangelos Marinakis is a man full of passion, full of the fire you talk about, and I don't want him to change at all. I've got to be honest with you. I love everything about this guy. I know that he's got a bit of a reputation from Greece, but I don't care. Because you know what? I think he has been absolutely brilliant for Nottingham Forest since he took ownership of the club. Sure, there's been some moments along the way that haven't gone down too well. I'll throw it in there. The ticket pricing. I know that that's a bone of contention. Things haven't always been plain sailing. There's been some unpopular decisions. And of course, the whole episode around where we might end up playing away from the city ground or not, that is another thing. And we'll come on to that again shortly. But all in all, Mr. Marinakis has got the best interests of the club and the city at heart. He's a fighter. He's someone who goes into bat. He doesn't stand there letting other people, do the work. He'll get down at the touchline. He'll get in the faces. He's not content to sit back and let the top six have it their way. He wants to be back in that top six. He wants Nottingham Forest back at the top table where we deserve. Let's not forget that when the Premier League was formed, we were one of a handful of clubs that was originally spoken to. We were the top table team amongst Arsenal and Man United and Liverpool and so on and Chelsea weren't involved in that, by the way. It was Forest. Forest were the team that were considered to be in the top 4 or 5 clubs in the country. And Marinakis wants to get us back to that. And things like him stepping in to buy Viv Anderson's medal. For those who didn't see the news, Viv Anderson was auctioning some items off from his personal memorabilia collection. His 1980 European Cup winners medal was going up to auction for 10 to 15k. When Forest learned about it, when Marinakis learned about it, he stepped in. He made a deal with Anderson to buy the medal, I think at top dollar, with a donation on top. So sorting Anderson out in the back pocket. And that medal is now in the Forest Museum. That medal's staying in the club. I mean, I absolutely love everything about that story. It's amazing. And then to top it off as well, Raf, I'll get to you for your thoughts on this now. Vicky McClure's Dementia Choir, a big part of the community. And Vicky McClure is a national treasure, not just a Nottingham treasure. Vicky bloody McClure is fantastic. I can't tell you how amazing she is. She runs the Dementia Choir for the community of Notts. And the owner, Mr. Marinakis, has made the gesture that sees the Dementia Choir utilise the stadium's Robin Hood suites for practice sessions and social gatherings, which will underline his commitment to supporting the local community and helping organisations promote both mental and physical well-being. He said from the start, I want to be in the community. He's got the netball team in the background coming up as well. All kinds of other things going on. What have you got to say about the big man, Rafa? I think I've spoken, and my colours are on my sleeve. I think he's brilliant. What about you?
So all right. Top banner, the guy's a hero. He's just an absolute hero. If you look at where the direction of travel we are now in, if we want to be where Villa are, he's the person to take us there.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Yeah.
And no one is perfect. For any kids watching or listening, being unbelievably rude to authority is not the way to go. You should be constructive in the way that you do it. The way that Marinakis is doing this may not be the best possible way to vent his frustration, but he has valid frustration, and challenging in a good way institutions to become better is a good thing. Progressively thinking outside the box and championing ideas. And I think that's what he's doing. He's just a very passionate guy, and it spills over sometimes. The only concern I've really got about him is the more that he does these things and he gets brought up on charges, for him, he can get his piggy bank from when he was 7 years old and give it a shake, and he can pay for all of the fines that are coming his way. That's not a problem. The issue is, if they're personal fines, they don't hit the PSR, and they're not even hit squad cost ratio in the future anyway. So there's no problem from that perspective. So he can carry on doing that. The only one downside is if the FA then come down harder on Nuno and anyone else that gets sent off because they see this as an aggregated aggravation from the club. And that's the only one downside. But for what he's doing, have you seen the netball stadium that he's put together for them to play in? It's absolutely amazing. And the budget he's given them, apparently basically put together the Harlem Globetrotters of netball by the looks of things. Their team's superb as well. What's being done with the dementia choir? That is I think there's just more and more and more and more of that, of Forest being one big family. Like, we're one big family as a community of all these sports clubs, all under that Nottingham identity. And
Yeah.
that's really what he's beginning to build. And it is, honestly, it makes me so proud of the club with him at the helm. And yeah, just long may it continue. I just hope he doesn't get bored. I hope he stays here. I hope that we progress in the way that he wants us to, because everyone will be happy if his dream gets realized for us.
I agree completely. I don't see him walking away. I see that he's a winner. He's used to winning, and he won't be satisfied until he gets Forest to where he wants to get them to. Now, along the way, there might be things that, or decisions or other things that upset the fan base or so on. And one of the things that was clearly a massive point of discussion, Richard, was the stadium. So we know that this stadium is now pretty much in a situation where we're going to go for the 42,000 capacity at City Ground. So staying where we put. And for those of you that have seen our episodes with Matt Drewitt, the architect, please go back and look at episode 1, episode 2 with him. He also talks a little bit on the Forest opposition fan view last week as well. So, we're staying at the City Ground. This week we've seen a change of chairmanship again, Richard, with Tom Cartledge, who'd been in post for 18 months or so, now stepping down, or being stepped down, and Nicholas Randall, former chairman, coming back into the fore. So this was potentially a bit of a head scratcher, and rumours are rife and reasoning is rife as to why that has been. We were talking about, was it Tom Cartledge that was driving the move to Toton, and now that's not happening? His services are no longer needed. He is staying in the club, by the way, so he's not vanishing. He's going to be on the board still. I always thought that the move to Toton was probably a Marinakis idea, because he was still getting used to the tuning of the fans, and so he thought 50k stadium, what's not to like, without really realising it was going to really be a sore point. But bringing Tom Cartledge in to drive that idea, I think, was why Tom was the chairman for that period. And now that isn't going to happen. It feels like maybe there's been an agreement between Tom and Marinakis to say, well, look, we still want you involved because we're going to be doing work at the ground, but now Nicholas is going to come back and be the chairman. I mean, what did you make of all of that? Did you have a different view on the ins and outs of that, or do you think possibly that the Toton idea was always Marinakis's and Cartledge is now a bit more redundant?
Yeah, it's a bit. There's a bit of ambiguity around that, right? Because the way it's framed in the article in the Athletic, I think it almost infers that, in a way, that Tom Cartledge was part of his agenda, I guess, for lack of a better word. I don't know if it's an agenda. If agenda might be an extreme statement, but yeah, it seemed as though that was he functioned in a very specific way. Obviously, he's a community member. He's someone who contributes through his architecture firm in terms of developing the area, right? And he's a fan of the team. So you can't say that he doesn't love the club and he's not passionate about their progression. And I can't imagine he wouldn't have any reverence whatsoever for that ground, given what it has been to that community and the history it has, which again illustrates, I think, along with what you mentioned about Viv Anderson and what he did to support Vicky McClure and the Dementia Choir. It shows that he's coming good on what he's stated he would do, which is to he is a bit of a kind of a dichotomy of extremes, right? This passion to get down in the tunnel and cause havoc to a degree, and stress out the authority that is the FA and the PGO and the MOL. But he's also the same guy who'll come around and do something very charitable and kind, as what he did for Anderson, and to reverence the history of the club. So I think it doesn't strike me as strange if it was him that was at the heart of the Toton concept, because of what we've seen him do with Olympiacos. I mean, he's created this sort of complex, right, with this beautiful training ground, these facilities that he's developed, and he's pumped a lot of money and energy and time into that to develop his childhood club, the thing that he loved growing up. in a similar way that Tom Cartledge did, and seeing that come to fruition. So maybe it started with Marinakis, and then it just manifested into Cartledge really feeling like that was a better option for the trajectory of the team, because we have to be quote unquote more Premier League like, right, in terms of how we operate and even optically what we do from a marketing standpoint. So I could see why he may have been very locked into that. But in the end, I think I would imagine what won over for Marinakis was his heart and his desire to see the history of that club be retained and improved and refined, so that you still keep the soul of what we do in that city, but at the same time make it obviously more modern and more amenable to what it is to be a Premier League club.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on. We've got literally 5 or 6 minutes left before we finish today. I wanted to quickly, before we do so, mention the shirt behind Richard, his star boy, Morgan Gibbs-White, back in the England squad. I wasn't surprised. I felt like when he was named by Lee Carsley and also for Angel Gomez in the last squad, I felt like if it's just going to be a one-off, then I think that kind of, it's almost, what's the point? We know that Carsley, Raf, has got these 3 squads, the previous one, this one, and the next one. I think Gibbs-White will be called in for all of them, and he's in amongst the big guns this time. Bellingham's back, Foden's back, Palmer, whilst named last time, had to drop out with an injury. He's in. So to see Gibbs-White, and I thought was great. You know, can he really cement his place in that England squad, do you reckon, Raf?
I think there's a difference between being in the squad and getting game time and adding to his caps. But I think just being in the squad is a phenomenal achievement with everyone coming back that wasn't in it. And so everyone kind of said, well, he got in it because these 3 aren't there, therefore he's next man up, using a Cooperism.
Right.
But the fact that they're all now fit and he's still been picked is phenomenal. I do think Carsley's taking the job very seriously and wants to put his own stamp on the squad.
I think he's going to get the job full time.
If I hope he does as well, because
Yeah.
I just think that's a blueprint for success. If you look at how we've been successful in the under X's,
And Spain did the same.
It's just a really good blueprint from success. He knows the players that he trusts, how he works, play in the style that he wants. And I think that will really benefit Morgan in staying in the squad for as long as possible. It's now up to him in those training camps to really turn it on, and to be that person that Lee Carsley wants him to be, to keep his place, because Maddison's going to be knocking on the door, and he has tuned up again. He's suddenly playing better. So there's going to be clamour for him to be put back in. So it's going to be tough. It's not a given just because Carsley wants him in. It's going to have to be justified. But he's done everything he has to right now. He's in that squad again. Train well and keep your place.
As people that watch our channel know, we do love a Forest football shirt. And you'll see Raf is wearing the 2015-16 home gold edition, which was the centenary shirt. Not centenary, 150-year shirt, beg your pardon. I'm wearing the yellow away kit from that season. I'll put up on the screen as well. And Richard has gone for the season after away shirt, which is the black. So we do love a football shirt here at Talking Reds. Well, I do, and I collect them quite fondly and quite openly. So we always try to get a different shirt on every time, or I do certainly, and try and reference the kits down the years. The kits this season I'm pretty happy with. The light blue Man City one is a lucky kit, it seems, for us. Hopefully we won't be wearing that tomorrow, Sunday rather. I think we'll be wearing our red shirt, but ultimately we need to get some points on the board no matter what shirt we're wearing when we're away from home. All right, we're going to close off. I did mention a quiz question right at the start. I posed the question, which player in Forest history is the oldest to represent us in a league game? We didn't get anyone coming in the comments with that, but the answer, anybody want to come in with it? The answer is was Dave Besant, aged 42 years and 47 days, versus Tranmere. Had to be a goalkeeper, of course. May 2001. Dave Besant is the Nottingham Forest's oldest league player in a game. So another quiz question for you at the start of next time. And just before we finish off, I want to talk a little bit of FPL. We have got a Talking Reds league, and we'll add it to the screen, and we can see that at the top, Locomotive Forest, managed by Daniel Robinson, is leading the way with 449 points. In second place, great friend to Talking Reds, the Fulham fan, but the architect, and he's got a soft spot for Forest. Matt Druitt was stuck with it on 414. And in third place, coming out of nowhere, Orlando Superstars. My son Orlando has got up to third place. And let me tell you, he's never played FPL before. I've shown him what to do. He's got his iPad. He picks his own team. No help from daddy. He's picking his own team. That boy is up to third. So, you know, he definitely knows what he's talking about. Paul Morley's dropped down. Paul down to fifth. Ain't a lot going for it. So Paul just dropping down slightly, and we'll move further down the table. Let's pick out some of our regulars. Raf, you're in 20th. Raf's Random Rabble, you've dropped down. Just below you, Danscape, Bolly. He's dropped. He's back up to 25th, but he was higher. And then we're getting into the basement, boys. I mean, I'm having a nightmare of a season. Down in 36th on 337 points. My team's always called Forest Fire. And then Okie Brick, Richard Spray, bringing up the rear of our clan, down in 40th position. If you are joining in on the Talking Reds FPL table, we'll try and highlight some of that as we go through the episodes. But, you know, it's just a bit of fun, and we're grateful for you guys joining in with that as well. If you would be so kind, as I always ask you to hit like and subscribe. It does us a great favour. All right, guys? So we're trying to get our subs up. Please do hit like and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell any Forest fans you know, yeah, that Talking Reds is okay. They do silly things. They have wacky music and things that don't, you know, always go according to plan. And, you know, our content, I think we're trying to be a little bit different in places. We still love the likes of Forest Focus and Forest Fan TV and Miss Rolling In and Red Side of the Trent. Those guys do great jobs, but we try to do our thing a little bit differently. And hopefully you're enjoying the content. We always say thank you for stopping by and watching and listening. 5-star reviews on the likes of Apple and Spotify are perfectly welcome as well. All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. Richard Spray, thank you so much for joining us in Oklahoma. Any last words?
No. Have a great day, guys.
Jordan
Come on,
Sweet.
you Reds.
Raf the Random Pundit will be on Twitter with more of his stats and facts over the weekend. So engage with Raf and Talking Reds. Raf, thanks ever so much for joining us as ever.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure to be on.
So that does take us to the end. We're going to be coming back after the Chelsea game, which is 2 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. The women are kicking off as well on Sunday. They're at home to Halifax, so they'll be looking to get a win. Both games kicking off at 2 p.m. So if you fancy some live football in Nottingham, you can go and watch the women play at City Ground. Forest at Chelsea. We're going to stop Cole Palmer. We're going to get that point on the road. We're going to come away victorious. This is Talking Reds. We'll see you next time.